What if I told you that the most iconic image in human history, the face of Jesus Christ, a symbol of hope and salvation for billions, might not be what we've been led to believe for centuries? What if the Jesus we've been taught to see, the one depicted as fair-skinned with blue eyes, isn't the true reflection of his heritage? What if the real story is more complex and, dare I say, more African? This isn't just a theological challenge, it's a profound call to re-examine everything we've been told about Jesus, faith, and our shared history. The truth behind Jesus' identity, buried beneath centuries of cultural imprints, speaks to the richness of his heritage and the diverse world he embodied. The portrayal of Jesus as a Europeanized figure has been deeply ingrained in our culture through religious art, films, and even in the illustrations in our childhood Bibles. But let's pause and reflect. This image is far removed from the historical, geographical reality of who Jesus truly was. To understand the significance of a black Jesus, we must go beyond our modern interpretations and step into the world of first-century Judea, a place that was a cultural melting pot of African, Asian, and European influences. The ancient world wasn't divided by the rigid racial categories we often use today. Instead, it was a mosaic of peoples, constantly reshaped by migration, trade, and conquest. And in this world, the notion of Jesus having African roots isn't about modern racial categories, it's about understanding the multicultural influences that shaped his life and ministry. Let's step back into history for a moment and consider the historical evidence pointing to Jesus' African connections. One of the most powerful accounts comes from the Gospel of Matthew, which tells us about Jesus' family fleeing to Egypt to escape King Herod's persecution. This wasn't just a brief detour, it was a years-long sojourn. Egypt, a North African country, had long been a refuge for the Jewish people, especially during times of hardship. The Holy Family's time in Africa wasn't a mere historical note, it was a formative part of Jesus' early years. It's a powerful reminder of how the African continent played a crucial role in the salvation story. Jesus, the Messiah, sought refuge in Africa, blending into Egyptian society during a period of great peril. This chapter of Jesus' life foreshadows the global, multicultural nature of the faith he would eventually inspire. But the African connection doesn't stop there. As we follow Jesus through the Gospels, we encounter more instances that highlight the intersection of African and Jewish communities. Take, for example, Simon of Cyrene, the man who helped Jesus carry his cross. Cyrene, located in modern-day Libya, was part of North Africa. Simon's role in this pivotal moment of Christian history underscores the deep historical ties between African and Jewish communities during Jesus' time. These cultural exchanges were more than mere happenstance, they were woven into the fabric of Jesus' mission and the diverse world he came to save. Looking deeper into early Christian art and iconography, particularly in Africa, we find even more evidence supporting Jesus' African identity. In regions like Egypt, Ethiopia, and other parts of North Africa, some of the oldest depictions of Jesus show him with dark skin, woolly hair, and features that reflect African heritage. The Coptic Christians of Egypt, one of the oldest Christian communities in the world, have consistently portrayed Jesus in ways that reflect their own ethnic identity. These aren't just artistic interpretations, they reflect a deep-rooted understanding of Jesus' heritage, preserved in African Christian traditions for centuries. In Ethiopia, where Christianity dates back to the 4th century, Jesus has long been depicted with African features, and this understanding has shaped the faith and identity of Ethiopian Christians for nearly 2 millennia. So why is this forgotten story of a black Jesus so important today? In a world still grappling with the aftermath of colonialism, slavery, and systemic racism, reclaiming the African identity of Jesus is an act of historical and spiritual reclamation. It challenges long-held assumptions about race, faith, and human worth. For centuries, Christianity has been portrayed through a Eurocentric lens, often used to justify oppression and inequality. But when we embrace the African roots of Jesus, we uncover a narrative of divine justice and truth that is both healing and empowering. It affirms the dignity and worth of African people, offering a profound sense of representation and belonging within the Christian faith. This is not just for people of African descent, though. The significance of black Jesus extends far beyond the African diaspora. By acknowledging the African heritage of Jesus, we invite ourselves to confront our biases and expand our understanding of history. We begin to reimagine a faith that embraces the full spectrum of human experience. We are called to build a faith that is truly inclusive, one that celebrates the diversity of God's creation. As we continue exploring this topic, we'll unravel how the image of Jesus was intentionally whitened over centuries. We'll delve into the theological and social implications of this alteration and why reclaiming the story of Black Jesus is essential for addressing racial justice today. We'll also explore how this forgotten narrative challenges us to rethink our understanding of faith, identity, and human dignity. This journey is not just about correcting historical inaccuracies, it's about uncovering a truth that transforms how we see ourselves, our faith, and each other. To begin, let's take a look at the geographical context of Jesus' life. Jesus was born in Bethlehem, a town in Roman-occupied Judea, part of modern-day Israel and Palestine. This region, at the crossroads of Africa, Asia, and Europe, had been a melting pot of different cultures and peoples for centuries. The very land where Jesus lived was marked by migration, conquest, and cultural exchange. The physical features of the people in this area were diverse, reflecting the various ethnic backgrounds that had intermingled over the centuries. Jesus' appearance would likely have reflected this blend of influences, his features not alien to the region but a reflection of the diversity around him. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence comes from the Gospel of Matthew, in chapter 2:13-15, where we learn of Jesus' family fleeing to Egypt to escape King Herod's persecution. This wasn't a brief visit. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph likely spent years in Egypt, blending in with the predominantly African population. The significance of this journey is far-reaching. It speaks not only to God's providence but also to the profound connection between the Holy Land and Africa. Jesus' early life in Egypt exposed him to African culture, languages, and ways of life. This African sojourn is often overlooked but plays a vital role in understanding Jesus' identity and the inclusive nature of his ministry. What does this mean for us today? Understanding the African roots of Jesus offers a deeper connection to his life and mission. It challenges us to reconsider how we see Jesus, how we see others, and how we live out our faith. The story of Black Jesus invites us into a more complete understanding of who he was and the world he came to save. This isn't just about race, it's about reclaiming a powerful truth that unites us all in our shared humanity. Let us step forward in this journey, embracing the diversity of God's creation and celebrating the rich, multifaceted heritage of Jesus Christ. What if the most iconic image of Jesus, an image that has shaped billions of lives, was not only misleading, but a distortion of the truth? Imagine the face of Christ, depicted for centuries as a fair-skinned man with blue eyes, was not an accurate reflection of who he truly was. What if the Jesus we've grown up with, seen in art, movies, and religious texts, isn't the whole story? What if his true identity was far more complex and, importantly, more African? It's time we reconsider the story of Black Jesus, a story suppressed for centuries, one that reveals the true roots of the Savior of humanity. The depiction of Jesus as a fair-skinned, blue-eyed figure is so deeply embedded in our culture, we almost accept it without question. From childhood Bibles to grand religious paintings, this image has been repeated and reinforced through generations. But let's stop for a moment and challenge this long-standing portrayal. The truth is, this image is far removed from the historical reality of Jesus. His life, his heritage, and his identity were deeply intertwined with a world vastly different from the Eurocentric lens we often view him through today. To truly understand Jesus' African heritage, we must journey back in time and place him within the rich, multicultural context of first-century Judea. Jesus was born in Bethlehem, a town situated in Roman-occupied Judea, at the crossroads of Africa, Asia, and Europe. This strategic geographical location placed Jesus in a melting pot of cultures, ethnicities, and religious influences. Unlike the rigid racial categories we use today, the ancient world was a diverse tapestry shaped by migration, trade, and conquest. Jesus wasn't confined to modern racial constructs, he embodied the cultural and ethnic diversity of his time. His identity was shaped by this intricate web of influences, including African, Middle Eastern, and Mediterranean cultures. This is the true picture of Jesus, not confined to one racial group but reflective of the global community he came to save. Let's delve into the historical evidence that points to Jesus' African connections. One striking example comes from the Gospel of Matthew, which recounts how Jesus' family fled to Egypt to escape King Herod's persecution. This wasn't just a brief stopover. Jesus' family sought refuge in Africa, living there for years. Egypt, a North African country, had long been a sanctuary for the Jewish people, especially during times of hardship. This journey to Egypt is not just a historical footnote, it's a powerful symbol of Africa's role in the story of salvation. The continent that once sheltered Israel during a time of famine now became the protector of the Messiah. This chapter in Jesus' early life highlights the deep, often overlooked connection between Africa and Jesus' story, foreshadowing the global nature of the faith he would inspire. But the African connection doesn't stop with Jesus' early years in Egypt. Throughout the Gospels, we see numerous examples of the diverse, multicultural world that shaped Jesus' ministry. Take Simon of Cyrene, for instance, the man who helped Jesus carry his cross. Cyrene was a city in what is now Libya, North Africa. Simon's role in this pivotal moment of Christian history underscores the deep ties between African and Jewish communities in Jesus' time. His presence in Jerusalem and his involvement in the crucifixion story highlight the connections between Africa and the events that would shape Christianity. Early Christian art provides further evidence of Jesus' African heritage. In Egypt, Ethiopia, and other parts of Africa, some of the oldest surviving depictions of Jesus show him with dark skin, woolly hair, and distinctly African features. These depictions aren't modern reinterpretations or attempts to impose a new narrative. They reflect how early Christian communities, close in time and place to Jesus, understood and depicted him. The Coptic Christians of Egypt, one of the world's oldest Christian communities, have consistently portrayed Jesus with African features. Similarly, in Ethiopia, where Christianity has been practiced since the 4th century, Jesus has been depicted as having African features. These artistic traditions weren't just about cultural adaptation, they were grounded in a deep-seated understanding of Jesus' identity, preserved in African Christian communities for centuries. As we consider the cultural and ethnic diversity of Jesus' followers, we also see how early Christianity was a movement that transcended narrow ethnic boundaries. The Gospels and the Book of Acts describe a community that quickly spread beyond Judea, attracting followers from all walks of life and various ethnic backgrounds. This multicultural nature of early Christianity suggests that Jesus was a figure who could be related to by people from diverse ethnic and cultural backgrounds. One particularly noteworthy example is Simon of Cyrene, who helped Jesus carry his cross. His African heritage highlights the deep connection between African and Jewish communities during Jesus' time, emphasizing the global reach of his mission. The evidence for Jesus' African heritage isn't just about his physical appearance, it's also reflected in the themes and teachings he emphasized. Many of Jesus' parables resonate with African spiritual traditions, particularly those focused on community, interconnectedness, and a holistic view of life. These themes align closely with African worldviews, further strengthening the connection between Jesus and African traditions. It's not just about race or ethnicity, it's about a shared spiritual and cultural heritage that has often been overlooked in the dominant narratives of Western Christianity. As we begin to piece together this evidence, a much richer, more complex picture of Jesus emerges, one that reflects the diversity of his homeland and his ministry. Jesus was not confined to a singular racial identity but embodied the intersection of Middle Eastern, African, and Mediterranean cultures. Recognizing Jesus' African heritage is not about claiming him exclusively for one racial or ethnic group, it's about acknowledging the full breadth of his identity and the multicultural roots of the Christian faith. This recognition has profound implications for how we understand issues of race, identity, and belonging in both Christianity and society at large. As we continue exploring the forgotten story of Black Jesus, we must ask ourselves, how did we come to the point where Jesus was depicted predominantly as a white figure, so far removed from his true heritage? This question leads us to the history of the whitewashing of Jesus, a complex process that transformed Jesus from a Middle Eastern and African man to a European-looking figure over centuries. Understanding this process is essential for addressing the ongoing issues of racial injustice and cultural representation that still shape our world today. In the earliest days of Christianity, there was no standardized image of Jesus. Christian art was more symbolic than representational, often using images like the fish or the shepherd to represent Christ. However, as Christianity spread beyond its Jewish roots and began to attract Gentile converts, the demand for visual representations of Jesus grew. This is where the first shifts in how Jesus was depicted began. In the 4th century AD, Emperor Constantine's conversion to Christianity transformed the religion from a persecuted minority faith to the official religion of the Roman Empire. As Christianity became intertwined with Roman imperial power, there was a push to make Jesus more relatable to the ruling classes of Rome. Artists began to depict Jesus in ways that aligned with Greco-Roman ideals of beauty, lighter skin, straight hair, and European features. This process of Romanizing Jesus wasn't just about aesthetics, it was a deeply political move. By portraying Jesus as someone who looked like the ruling class, it helped legitimize Christian rule and made the faith more palatable to European converts. As Christianity spread further into Europe during the Middle Ages, the depiction of Jesus became increasingly European, further divorcing him from his Middle Eastern and African roots. The Renaissance era saw an explosion of religious art, with iconic painters like Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, and Raphael creating enduring images of Jesus. These images, while masterpieces, also solidified the image of a white European Christ. The patrons of these artworks were often wealthy Europeans, and the figures in the paintings reflected their own features, further distancing Jesus from his true heritage. The age of European exploration and colonization marked a darker chapter in the whitewashing of Jesus. European powers spread Christianity across the globe, bringing with them the image of a white Jesus. This version of Christ became a tool of colonization, used to assert the supposed superiority of European culture and justify the subjugation of non-white peoples. Missionaries in Africa, the Americas, and Asia often presented a white Jesus, implicitly linking salvation with European culture and appearance. The question we must ask now is, how do we reclaim the true story of Black Jesus? How do we confront this history and bring back the full, rich narrative of Jesus' identity? The journey is just beginning, and it's a story that has the power to change how we see ourselves, our faith, and each other. Let's start the conversation, unearth the truth, and embrace a faith that reflects the true diversity of God's creation. What if the image of Jesus Christ, the symbol of hope and salvation for billions, was a distortion? What if the image of a fair-skinned, blue-eyed Jesus that we've all grown up with isn't just an inaccurate portrayal, but part of a deeper, more complex narrative, one that has been buried for centuries? What if the true identity of Jesus is far more diverse and richer than we've been led to believe? What if Jesus had African roots, reflecting the heritage of a multicultural world that shaped him? This forgotten story of Black Jesus is not just about correcting an image, it's a profound reclamation of history and identity. For centuries, the portrayal of Jesus as a fair-skinned, European figure has been so ingrained in art, culture, and religion that it's become the default image of Christ. From childhood Bibles to grand religious paintings, this version of Jesus has dominated our imagination. But the reality is that this portrayal is far removed from the truth of who Jesus really was. Jesus lived in a world rich with cultural intersections, a world far more diverse than the one we often imagine. His heritage was shaped not by the narrow, often divisive racial categories we use today, but by a multicultural society that combined African, Middle Eastern, and Mediterranean influences. To understand the African heritage of Jesus, we must travel back to 1st century Judea, where Jesus was born in Bethlehem. This region was not just a land of Jewish heritage but a crossroads of Africa, Asia, and Europe. In this melting pot of cultures, ethnicities, and traditions, Jesus' identity was formed. This wasn't a time of rigid racial categories but a time of fluid exchanges, migration, and trade. The ancient world was not divided by the same racial lines we know today, but rather it was an intersection of influences. And Jesus was not just a figure belonging to one group, he embodied the diversity of his world, with African, Middle Eastern, and Mediterranean roots intertwined. One key piece of evidence for Jesus' African heritage is his family's flight to Egypt. In the Gospel of Matthew, we learn that Jesus' family sought refuge in Africa to escape King Herod's persecution. This wasn't just a short visit, they likely lived in Egypt for several years. Egypt, a North African country, had long been a sanctuary for Jewish people, especially during times of crisis. The fact that Jesus' family was able to blend into the Egyptian population speaks volumes about the diverse African influences that shaped his early life. This part of Jesus' story highlights the significant role that Africa played in the salvation narrative, not just as a place of refuge, but as a protector of the Messiah himself. But the African connections to Jesus' story don't end there. The Gospels mention several other instances that reveal the multicultural fabric of his world. Take, for example, Simon of Cyrene, the man who helped Jesus carry his cross. Cyrene, located in present-day Libya, was a city in North Africa. Simon's role in carrying Jesus' cross emphasizes the strong connections between African and Jewish communities in Jesus' time. This connection wasn't just incidental, it was a vital part of the unfolding of Christianity and the broader story of salvation. Early Christian art offers another powerful reminder of Jesus' African heritage. In Egypt, Ethiopia, and other parts of Africa, some of the oldest depictions of Jesus show him with dark skin, woolly hair, and distinctly African features. These depictions aren't modern reinterpretations, they reflect how the early Christian communities, close to the time and place of Jesus' life, understood and portrayed him. The Coptic Christians of Egypt, one of the oldest Christian communities in the world, have long depicted Jesus with African features. Similarly, in Ethiopia, where Christianity has been practiced since the 4th century, Jesus has been consistently portrayed with African features. These artistic traditions are not merely cultural adaptations but reflect a deep understanding of Jesus' identity, preserved and passed down through generations. In addition to these visual representations, the multicultural nature of the early Christian movement offers further evidence of Jesus' African connections. Christianity quickly spread beyond Judea, attracting followers from all ethnic backgrounds. The early church was not just a Jewish movement, it was a faith that reached across cultural and ethnic boundaries. This universal appeal speaks to the inclusivity of Jesus' message, which transcended narrow ethnic categories. One particularly notable figure is Simon of Cyrene. His presence in Jerusalem and his involvement in carrying Jesus' cross serve as a reminder of the deep, historical ties between African and Jewish communities, and by extension, the global reach of Jesus' mission. Beyond just his physical features, the African influence on Jesus' teachings is also evident. Many of his parables and teachings resonate with African spiritual traditions, particularly those that emphasize community, interconnectedness, and a holistic view of life. These shared values provide further layers to the African connection in Jesus' story, revealing a deep alignment between his message and African worldviews. As we piece together this evidence, a much fuller, richer picture of Jesus emerges, one that reflects the true diversity of his world. Jesus wasn't just a figure of one ethnicity or race, he embodied the intersection of multiple cultural influences. Recognizing Jesus' African heritage isn't about claiming him exclusively for one race, it's about acknowledging the full scope of his identity and the multicultural roots of Christianity. This understanding challenges us to rethink our assumptions about Jesus, Christianity, and the role of race and ethnicity in faith. But why does this matter today? Why should we care about the forgotten African heritage of Jesus in a world that seems to be so distant from the historical realities of his time? The truth is, the story of Black Jesus has profound implications for today's world, especially as it pertains to racial justice, cultural representation, and spiritual authenticity. For African Americans and people of African descent, the image of a white Jesus has long created a painful disconnect. Imagine growing up in a world where every representation of divinity, purity, and salvation looks nothing like you. This disconnect can breed a deep sense of alienation and internalized racism. Reclaiming the African identity of Jesus is a powerful act of spiritual and cultural reclamation. It affirms that Black people's bodies, features, and heritage are not just accepted by God but are reflected in the very incarnation of the divine. For many African Americans, reclaiming Black Jesus is not just about changing an image, it's about seeing themselves fully represented in their faith, not as outsiders or afterthoughts but as central to the very story of Christianity. This shift can be transformative, fostering a sense of belonging and empowerment in religious spaces that have often been sites of exclusion. But the significance of Black Jesus extends far beyond the African American community. For people of all races, acknowledging Jesus' African heritage challenges us to confront our biases and rethink our assumptions about race, faith, and human dignity. For white Christians, particularly those in Europe and North America, recognizing Jesus' non-white identity is crucial in dismantling internalized notions of white supremacy. It's a step toward creating a more just and inclusive Christianity, one that fully embraces the diversity of God's creation. The story of Black Jesus is also deeply connected to the ongoing struggle for racial justice. The whitewashing of Jesus wasn't just about art or representation, it was intimately tied to systems of power and oppression. By reclaiming Jesus' true identity, we are challenging the theological underpinnings that have been used to justify racism for centuries. This is especially relevant in the context of movements like Black Lives Matter, which call for the affirmation of Black dignity and worth. The story of a Black Jesus aligns deeply with this struggle, offering a powerful religious and cultural affirmation that Black lives don't just matter. They are made in the image of God and reflected in the person of Christ. Understanding Jesus' African heritage invites us to re-examine his teachings through a new lens. It challenges us to consider how his ethnic and cultural background might have shaped his ministry. His message, seen through the lens of African wisdom traditions, takes on new depth and meaning. The recognition of Black Jesus is more than just a cultural shift, it's a theological reawakening that can transform how we approach salvation, community, and justice. Let's reclaim this story, not just as a historical truth but as a call to action, to create a world where all people are seen, valued, and embraced as part of God's beautiful and diverse creation. What if the very image of Jesus Christ, the one that has been ingrained in our minds for centuries, is a distortion? What if the fair-skinned, blue-eyed Jesus, widely depicted in religious art and culture, is far from the truth of who he really was? Imagine the impact of reclaiming the authentic identity of Jesus, a figure whose heritage and roots have been deliberately concealed, a man of color whose story intersects with Africa, the Middle East, and beyond. This isn't just a matter of artistic reinterpretation, it's a reclaiming of truth, a profound shift that challenges long-held assumptions about race, faith, and identity. For centuries, the image of Jesus has been whitewashed. From the paintings in churches to the depictions in children's Bibles, the fair-skinned Jesus has become the default. But what if this portrayal is not only inaccurate but a deliberate erasure of the diverse, multicultural reality of his world? The world of Jesus was far from homogeneous. It was a tapestry of cultures, ethnicities, and traditions, where African, Middle Eastern, and Mediterranean influences collided. Understanding Jesus' true identity requires us to see him within this context, one that acknowledges his African heritage as central to his story. The flight to Egypt, as recounted in the Gospel of Matthew, is one of the clearest signs of Jesus' African connection. The Holy Family fled Herod's tyranny and found refuge in Egypt, a land rich in African culture. This wasn't a brief stopover, they lived in Egypt for years, integrating into African society. Egypt, a historical sanctuary for Jewish people, was crucial in safeguarding the infant Jesus. This chapter of Jesus' life highlights Africa's role in salvation history, positioning it not just as a refuge, but as the protector of the Messiah. This moment isn't just historical, it speaks to the global and inclusive nature of the faith that would emerge from Jesus' life. Beyond his childhood years, the African connection to Jesus' life is further evidenced by figures like Simon of Cyrene, who helped carry Jesus' cross. Cyrene, located in present-day Libya, was part of North Africa. The fact that an African man played such a significant role in the most pivotal moment of Christian history underscores the deep historical ties between African and Jewish communities in Jesus' time. The role of Simon is more than just a footnote, it is a testament to the intersection of African and Jewish lives within the context of Jesus' story. Early Christian art offers a powerful lens through which we can view Jesus' true identity. In Egypt, Ethiopia, and other parts of Africa. Some of the earliest depictions of Jesus show him with dark skin and woolly hair, features that align with African characteristics. These depictions are not a modern-day invention. They represent how early Christian communities, who were closer to the time and place of Jesus, understood and depicted him. The Coptic Christians of Egypt, one of the oldest Christian communities in the world, have consistently portrayed Jesus with African features. In Ethiopia, where Christianity was embraced as early as the 4th century, Jesus has been depicted with African features for centuries. These early images reflect a deep understanding of Jesus' identity, long before the Europeanized image of Jesus took hold. As we continue exploring this narrative, it becomes clear that the African heritage of Jesus is not just about physical appearance but also about the cultural and spiritual context in which he lived and taught. Many of Jesus' teachings resonate with African spiritual traditions, particularly those that emphasize community, interconnectedness, and a holistic view of life. These themes align closely with African worldviews and add further layers to the African connection in Jesus' story. This connection is not just incidental but foundational to the message Jesus shared with the world. The concept of Black Jesus extends far beyond the African diaspora. For Christians worldwide, recognizing Jesus' African heritage challenges us to confront our own biases and preconceived notions about race and identity. For many African Americans, the image of a white Jesus has created a painful disconnect between their own identity and their faith. Growing up in a world where every representation of divinity, purity, and salvation looks nothing like you can lead to deep feelings of alienation and internalized racism. The revelation of Black Jesus is not just a historical correction, it is a powerful affirmation that Black people's heritage and features are reflected in the very incarnation of the divine. This is not just a theoretical shift, it is a spiritual and cultural reclamation. For African Americans, reclaiming the image of Black Jesus offers a new sense of belonging within the faith. It empowers them to see themselves as central to the Christian narrative, not as outsiders or afterthoughts, but as an integral part of the story from its very beginning. This shift can be transformative, offering healing for generations of spiritual trauma caused by racist theology and imagery. It's about recovering a more authentic faith, one that reflects the diversity of God's creation and affirms the dignity of all people. But the story of Black Jesus has wider implications, especially for white Christians in the West. Recognizing the true, multicultural heritage of Jesus is a crucial step in dismantling the internalized notions of white supremacy that have permeated Christian thought. It's a call to reevaluate how Christianity has been interpreted and practiced, to understand that one's cultural expression of Christianity is not the only valid or superior interpretation. This process of decentering our understanding of faith, while uncomfortable for some, is liberating and ultimately leads to a deeper, more inclusive Christianity. The historical process of whitewashing Jesus wasn't limited to religious art. It extended into theology and biblical interpretation, where European and American theologians often imposed their own cultural assumptions onto the Bible. This led to a Jesus who seemed to endorse the status quo, including the systemic oppression of marginalized groups. The narrative of Black Jesus confronts these theological distortions head-on, calling Christians to engage with a faith that has always been concerned with justice, liberation, and equality. Reclaiming Black Jesus intersects with contemporary movements for racial justice, such as the Black Lives Matter movement. This movement is not just about politics, it's about affirming the inherent dignity and worth of Black lives. The story of Black Jesus offers a profound theological counterpoint to the centuries of racist theology that have shaped societal attitudes towards race. It is a reminder that Black lives do matter, not just as a slogan, but as an essential truth rooted in the divine. In this context, Black Jesus serves as a source of spiritual strength for those fighting against systemic racism, offering a vision of Christ who stands in solidarity with the oppressed. The reclamation of Black Jesus is also deeply connected to efforts for decolonization, particularly in Africa and the African diaspora. Many movements are focused on stripping away the European cultural layers that have obscured Christianity's African roots. This effort to decolonize Christianity seeks to recover more authentic African expressions of the faith, including a reinterpretation of biblical texts through African and African American cultural lenses. This reclamation extends to religious education and media representation, where efforts are being made to create more accurate and diverse portrayals of biblical figures. Yet, the concept of Black Jesus remains controversial in some circles. Critics argue that focusing on Jesus' race misses the point of his universal message. However, advocates counter that recognizing Jesus' African heritage is about correcting historical imbalances and affirming the dignity of marginalized groups. The story of Black Jesus is not meant to replace one racial image with another, but to recover a more authentic understanding of who Jesus was, a figure whose identity transcended race and whose message of love, justice, and redemption is meant for all people. Ultimately, the reclamation of Black Jesus is about recovering a lost truth with profound implications for our understanding of faith, identity, and justice. It challenges us to reconsider how we view race, power, and privilege within Christianity and within society. By embracing this story, we take a crucial step toward creating a more inclusive, just, and spiritually authentic world, one where the fullness of Christ's identity can be recognized and celebrated by all people.